this week's episode of the Wicked Manor podcast. This week we will be discussing the origins of Halloween, where it got its start, and the traditions, Samhain, and more. So sit back and prepare yourself for another spooky episode. Welcome to the Wicked Manor podcast. I'm your host, and in this week's episode, we will be discussing the origins of Halloween, where it got its start, how the traditions came to be, the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, Christian influences on the holiday, and more. So let's get right into it. How did Halloween get its start? Well, before it was ever called Halloween, it was the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, pronounced S-O-W-I-N. Some pronounce it with W-I-N, some pronounce it with W-E-N. And no matter how you see it, people see the word spelled out S-A-M-H-A-I-N. It's not Samhain. I know I've made that mistake. I want to make that mistake too, but it's pronounced Samhain. So let's watch this clip right here, and we'll discuss it more in a minute.
Every year, millions of people around the country spill into streets, dressed as fairies, goblins, characters from their favorite movie franchise, and everything in between, partying and making mischief. But outside of a good time, how many know why they do it? Today, Halloween is a billion-dollar industry. But exactly how did it get there? While today Halloween is synonymous with commercialism, it wasn't always that way. The word Halloween comes from the words hallow, meaning holy person, and een, deriving as a contraction of Eve. And All Hallows Eve finds its origins all the way back in the time of the ancient Celtic pagans with the holiday of Samhain, a 3-day fire festival that essentially celebrated death and rebirth. The Celts, who lived in what is now Ireland, Scotland, the UK, and parts of Northern Europe, based their calendar on the Wheel of a Year, essentially divided into two halves, the light and the dark. When one gave way to the other, this transition was marked by a fire festival. The word Samhain translates into modern Irish to summer's end. Samhain celebrated the dead, and particularly the celebratory feast paid homage to loved ones who had passed away recently, essentially as an invitation for their spirits to rejoin the living. Many of Samhain's original rituals have been lost, but what we do know of their holiday traditions from Celtic folklore and ancient Roman historians is that they were intended to connect them to spirits, including costumes, most likely animal or furs to help them hide from the unfriendly ones, feasting, and making lanterns from hollowed-out gourds, seemingly the birth of the modern pumpkin jack-o'-lantern. Sacrifices, generally of crops or animals, were made during this time as an offering to the spirits. It was popular for tricks or pranks to be played by humans and blamed on mischievous spirits.
So what did we see there? Well, the traditions of Halloween date back to over 2,000 years, to the ancient Celts, pagans, and druids of what is now Ireland, Scotland, and England. Now, what this video did not mention is that some of the same festivals of Samhain were also practiced in Europe, such as in modern-day France. As you can see from the video, they had a different calendar system than what we do today. Samhain being one of those times of year, which marked the end of summer and the start of the dark times of the year, when crops didn't grow, the food supply depended on the harvest of that year to get them through the dark, cold winters. Samhain not only marked the end of summer, but was the time of harvest to harvest all their crops so they wouldn't starve during the winter. During the festival of Samhain, they celebrated the dead with bonfires sacrificing crops and animals to appease the spirits. The ancient Celts believed that during the time of Samhain, the veil or boundary between our world and the spirit world was at its thinnest. They would dress up in costumes, mainly animal heads and furs, to disguise themselves so evil spirits would think that they were one of them. They thought by doing this, the evil spirits would not harm them or their crops and that they just harvest. This was the birth of modern day costumes. As you saw, they carved out gourds to use as lanterns. These gourds were not always pumpkins, but other gourds as well, and so became the tradition of jack-o'-lanterns. They would also play tricks on others and blame them on the evil spirits. So now let's get into the next part of this video clip, the start of the transition from the Celts festival of Samhain to what is modern day Halloween, and that started with the Romans. Let's check it out.
As a result of the Roman invasion, with most of the Celtic land being conquered by Rome in 43 CE, the spread of Christianity and Catholicism would force pagan Celtic traditions to evolve or be completely repressed. In part, many Celtic traditions and popular pagan practices were reframed to fit within a Christian narrative, as a way of converting people with greater comfort and ease. Samhain would evolve into All Saints' Day, which was also referred to as All Hallows' Day, and was intended to be a day to celebrate the Christian saints and martyrs. Essentially, instead of honoring pagan gods and mischievous spirits, they now celebrated Christian figures. While the sacrifices were replaced by food offerings to the poor, the tricks and pranks continued, but instead they were now attributed to the spirits of the saints. Halloween evolved as a more secular version of All Hallows' Eve, and eventually it would become more popular and common practice than All Saints' Day.
So when the Romans conquered the Celtic lands, they forced the Celts to basically stop their rituals, not just Samhain, but the others, as they did not fit with the Christian narrative. Samhain would become All Saints' Day, or also referred to as All Hallows' Day. It was a way that people could still honor the dead, but it was more so to honor the saints. Basically, to celebrate Christian figures rather than what Samhain was about. We all know what the Romans did to Jesus later in time, and if he didn't align with their beliefs, they saw that as bad. However, they basically kept the same traditions, or some say stole, and made them their own. Pranks and tricks were still played, but were attributed to the saints instead of the sacrifices and the spirits. Offerings were offered to the poor instead of the sacrifices. Again, they kept the traditions to make their own in a way to fit their beliefs. So let's check out the next segment of this video.
It has its origins in the British Isles. There's a great disparity in its popularity in former British colonies. The Puritans who came to colonize America were Protestant and did not celebrate holidays of the Catholic Church, as they were believed to lead to idolatry. In the early days of the American colonies, celebrations of Halloween were mostly forbidden, as they were deemed too pagan or too Catholic by the Protestant colonizers, though elements of it began to incorporate into secular harvest-related events in the 1800s. The mid-19th century saw a large influx of immigrants entering the country, especially Irish immigrants who were greatly impacted by the potato famine. With these people came Halloween customs, out of which one of America's favorite holidays was formed. In keeping with the mischief, children would dress in costumes and be given money or fruit for artistic offerings like poetry, songs, or even jokes, instead of prayers. By the late 19th century, children were playing seemingly innocuous pranks on their small local communities. Adults would soon find incentive to dissuade children from playing pranks. Enter trick-or-treating.
The 20th century would finally see the commercialization of Halloween. By the 1920s and 30s, Halloween merchandise evolved to pre-made costumes for both children and adults.
After World War II in the 1950s, the economic boom had candy manufacturers getting on the Halloween bandwagon.
So as you saw there, when those that came to America to colonize it, They did not bring the traditions of the Catholic Church that they had stole from the Celts with them because they were Protestants and they focused more on the Bible as the ultimate salvation by grace through faith alone. They thought that the Catholic tradition would lead to idolatry, which they believed would lead to the worship of idols or an image of God or anything that would lead to devotion to other than one true God. I believe that they were going off the belief of the Old Testament, like what you might have seen in the movie Ten Commandments, where Moses destroyed the golden idol and those who worship it rather than have faith in God. We also saw how it also played out during the Salem witch trials. They saw them as evils and followers of witchcraft, which was not the case. It was someone who did not like another, and it spread like wildfire, the lies because someone deemed them pagan or Catholic. However, some other traditions made their way to America during the 1800s in a secular harvest because mostly Irish immigrants that entered the country due to the potato famine, things like bobbing for apples, dressing in costumes, and of course the pranks. To get rid of or persuade tricks from being played by offering treats. This was the birth of trick-or-treating. In the early 1900s, they saw the first commercialization of Halloween with pre-made costumes around the 20s and 30s, and by the 50s, candy makers got into the act. All these traditions stem back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. So let's watch the last bit of this video and we'll get into the more modern day part of Halloween here in a moment.
Is getting on the Halloween bandwagon. Movies and TV are also largely responsible for the proliferation of Halloween as a mass market holiday. Cinemas in the 50s offered scary movie festivals, and in the 60s the new television industry began running Halloween specials during Halloween season. By 2015, the National Retail Federation predicted spending on Halloween could reach $6.9 billion. Whether you believe that we've lost the meaning or not, Halloween has since evolved far beyond the days of pagan fire festivals. For more than a month out of the year, costume stores show up out of nowhere. Candy corn and Halloween-themed candies dominate whole aisles of grocery stores, and spooky shows and movies build out entire TV station schedules. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to dress up as a gruesome goblin or a sexy cat, or ignore the holiday altogether, Halloween has stood the test of time and proven itself as a holiday that's here to stay.
So by the 50s and 60s, the 1950s, 60s, and 60s, Halloween candy, especially as we know it now, was become heavily commercialized. With TV out, Halloween specials began running on TV during the Halloween season. Nowadays, the business of Halloween is a multi-billion dollar business. That is why my love of Halloween, that I chose to get into the business of Halloween and selling those things like costumes, mask props, decoration, and other Halloween related items. Going back to Halloween specials hitting TV screens, and I mentioned this in my first episode, I was born on the same day and year as the original Exorcist came out in theaters. That was one of the reasons for my love of Halloween. Now, most people have forgotten or never knew where all these traditions from the spooky holiday came from, but that is the reason for this episode, so that now you know where these traditions came from dressing in costumes to trick-or-treating, the veil between our world and the spirit world being at its thinnest, and of course the pranks. But there are still some of us that still know and understand the ancient ways of the Celts and pagans, as well as the festival of Samhain. I am one of those that practices a little of my Celtic ancestry, as I am of the Wiccan and pagan faith. Now, I do not get into the whole gathering around a bonfire, as I am more into scaring the hell out of people, whether it be working a haunt or setting up my own decorations. I guess if I was around 2,000 years ago, I would be considered one of those tricksters, or if I was around during the colonizations, I would have been tried and either hung or placed in jail for practicing witchcraft. And speaking of haunts, if you're watching this from Northeast Texas or nearby, I will be working a local haunt in Mount Pleasant called Haunted Hallows at Coppergate Ranch. Look it up if you're in the area and stop by and check it out. I will have only one scene on the trail, and no, I will not be working as a scare actor. I will have somebody else working my scene, however. I will not say what the scene is, as I have yet to start working on it. I drew up the designs and everything, but I haven't worked on it. And I haven't run it by the owner of the haunt yet. I will say this, though. It has to do with a spooky doll, and that is the only thing the hint that I'm going to give you. So that is all for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed and you learned something about Halloween, where it came from and all that good stuff. And I hope you come back next week for another spooky episode. So before we get out of here, make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, hit that notification bell, leave a comment down below, and share with all your spooky friends so you don't miss a spooky moment of the Wicked Manor podcast. Also, be sure to follow Wicked FX Manor on all my social media sites, which you can see right here. And if you haven't done so already, stop by my online store for Wicked FX Manor and pick up one of these products right here with a spooky design on them. Until next week, when we talk about preparing for the spooky season, what I have planned, what you might have planned, how to prepare for it, all that good stuff. Stay spooky, my friends. Well, that is all for this week's episode. But join us next week as we talk about planning for your spooky season and some ideas to make your spooky season the best that it can be. Until then, stay spooky, my friends.